Today's candidate school session will begin with Municipal Governance 101 Resort Villages and will include presentations that discuss how democracy works, the roles and responsibilities of council, how to navigate conflicts of interest, and challenges unique to resort villages. Following the presentations, we will have time for a Resort Village Hall where you can ask presenters your municipal governance questions. I'd now like to welcome today's presenters, Toby Duck, Marlena Paul, and Linda Anwheeler. Toby Duck is a municipal advisor with advisory services and municipal relations with the Ministry of Government Relations. Marlena Paul is a partner with Brownlee LLP and is a part of the firm's municipal law group. And Linda sits on the Provincial Association of Resort Communities, better known as Parks, as the second vice president. I'd like to thank Brownlee for sponsoring Suma's Candidate School. Thanks to Brownlee, all candidate school sessions are being offered free of charge. I would now like to invite Marlena to bring greetings on behalf of Brownlee.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today to be a part of the candidate school session for everyone who is interested in running in the upcoming elections. It's a big decision. It's an exciting decision. If you're here, you have probably been involved in your local community in one way or another, whether you've served on a board or acted in a school board capacity. Making the step to municipal governance is a big step, but a very important step. And we always want to make sure that we are encouraging qualified candidates, enthusiastic candidates to put their names forward for council. So happy to be here, happy to share some information with you that I'm hoping will help you understand what the role of a councillor is, give you a good understanding of what to expect should you be elected, give you some tips and trips on how to deal with your fellow councillors, how to address issues that are going to arise, debates that are going to happen, and some of the processes that you need to follow, as well as some of the legal issues that you need to be aware of. Happy to be here today and welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Marnie. We appreciate you being here, and thank you again to Brownlee for sponsoring this session. I'd now like to invite Toby to get us started.
All right, thanks, Steph. Can everyone see my screen? It's good to go.
Looks good.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for inviting us to speak today. Like Stephanie said, I am a municipal advisor with the Ministry of Government Relations. I've been here just for over 5 years. And in my previous life, I was an administrator for a town just outside of Regina for almost 11 years. There's going to be a lot of information I'm covering today. And if you have any questions afterwards, feel free, like Stephanie said, during the hall part to ask questions, or you can always reach out and contact any one of us advisors at any point during the work week. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to be discussing today. 3 main topics: municipal government, more specifically the purposes of municipalities, the services they provide, and the authority they have. Then I'm going to be talking about the roles and responsibilities of council, the administrator, and the public. And then lastly, we'll touch on procedures, how decisions are made, and how council meetings are to be conducted. So the first part is going to be municipal government, the foundations. The Municipalities Act, and I guess a little disclaimer here first, you may hear me refer to it as the Act or the MA. I'll do my best to refer to it as the Municipalities Act, but if you hear the Act or MA, I'm referring to the Municipalities Act. So the Municipalities Act is the legislation that allows municipalities to exist and provides a legislative framework under which to govern. In other words, the Municipalities Act is your fundamental rulebook. It recognizes all municipality types, so resort villages, towns, cities, and rural municipalities as a level of government, and it provides council and administration with the powers and duties to fulfill its purposes. The purpose of municipalities, the what are you here for, are to provide good government, a way to make decisions that affect everyone in the municipality. People want services and facilities, so part of your job will be determining what is needed versus what is wanted. and in figuring out how to resource these activities. People want communities that are safe. And of course, you'll want a municipality that continues beyond your term of office. And lastly, a municipality has a responsibility to safeguard infrastructure and public assets. Municipalities are provided with natural person powers and governmental powers. What I mean by natural person powers is essentially, it means that a municipality has the same rights, powers, and privileges that a normal person or business has for the purpose of carrying out its activities. Natural person powers are subject to limitations or conditions that exist in legislation or regulations, such as borrowing and lending, investing, buying, selling of land. Now, governmental powers include activities that are outside the powers of natural person, like the ability to impose property taxes. A natural person power, you don't have that ability to impose property taxes, so this is your governmental powers. These types of activities tend to be very prescriptive. It tells you exactly what can be done and that you have to do it. There are things that municipalities shall do. These are your duties or obligations. For example, municipalities shall conduct their meetings in public, and they must provide public notice before they discuss certain matters such as council remuneration. When you see the word shall in legislation, these are non-negotiable obligations. Those are the easy ones that you can always refer back to because you have to. Legislation says you have to do it. Where it gets tricky is where the word may comes in. And the word may is used extensively throughout the Act, which means the municipality may choose to do something or may not do something. Whatever your council decides to do or not to do, be prepared for the question why, because the Act also states that council is accountable to its voters. The expectation is that everyone is going to be treated fairly. The risk is not everyone is going to like the decisions you make. So to continue on, the next part I'm going to chat about is municipal services. The general public often don't recognize the wide variety of services delivered by municipalities. And a common statement from ratepayers and citizens that we hear, and you probably might hear, is, I don't get anything for my taxes. So in many ways, municipal services are similar to a computer's operating system. When it's working the way it's supposed to work, we don't even realize it's there. But when it crashes, oh boy, you start getting the phone calls. The municipality's financial statements classify the various municipal services by dividing the accounts into services such as general government services, protective services, transportation, and so on. Services can be delivered in many different ways. You can use your own resources to provide them. You can partnership with other municipalities, and that would be part of your natural person powers to enter into those type of agreements with them, or by the private sector as well. These are the important decisions that you, as well as the members of other municipalities, must make on an ongoing basis. What type of services you are going to be providing. And don't forget, every type of service and every level of service, there's going to be a cost implication to it as well. All right, the next part is roles and responsibilities. So understanding how your municipality functions is critical to ensuring all components work in harmony to achieve those goals. When we are speaking with municipalities that are experiencing discord, quite often their organizational structure has not been established or it's not being followed. So let's dissect this a little bit more. Who is part of your municipal team? The Municipalities Act states that council is accountable to the voters and that council must appoint an administrator. Other than that, the Act is silent. So we use this organizational structure as an example So voters are at the very top. They're the ones who elect you, the council, in. Council as a whole would be below the voters. And then below the voters is the administrator in this sample. And then below the administrators is the foreman, that would be your public works as well, and any other office staff that you may have. They would report up to the administrator, and the administrator would report up to council. The administrator is the one who is tasked with carrying out council's directions. And there's a lot of information available on municipal governance, and it often discusses the drawbacks of elected officials becoming involved in the municipal operations. When we hear of a municipality having trouble with staff or the public, the cause is often due to weakness in its organizational structure. So do not expect us to fix things for you. That's your job. And one of the things I do suggest, if you do not have an organizational structure established or it's not being followed, is to, as part of your council meeting, have council agree to what your structure looks like and make sure the staff is aware and on board. And this will prevent or help prevent the individual council members going and trying to give the public works directions or the admin staff directions. We're going to move on to the role of the elected officials. The general duties of councillors and the mayor are set out in sections 92 and 93 of the Municipalities Act and include the following duties: to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, to participate in developing and evaluating the policies, services, and programs of the municipality, to participate in council meetings and council committee meetings and meetings of other bodies to which they are appointed, to ensure that the administrative practices and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council, to keep in confidence matters discussed in private or to be discussed in private at a council or council committee meeting until discussed at the meeting held in public. We're going to talk about closed sessions versus open meetings later on in the presentation. That will hit this part here. A couple things that I do want to cover when it comes to the role of the elected officials. The mayor themselves do not have any more power than any other member of council. The mayor has a few more responsibilities, such as chairing meetings and signing bylaws. But any additional powers assigned to the mayor must be designated by council, resolution, or bylaw. For example, a mayor does not automatically have signing authority of text. This has to be designated by council and would have to be done by resolution or by bylaw. All members of council, including the mayor, are required to vote on resolutions. Unless absent from a meeting or abstaining from voting due to conflict of interest, choosing not to vote is considered a vote in the negative and is required to be recorded as such. There is a misconception in the municipal world that the mayor only votes to break ties, and that might be how it is with other boards. But when it comes to municipalities, this is not true. The Municipalities Act is very clear that if there's a tie vote, the vote is defeated because you do not have majority. It's 50-50. It's not majority, so it does not. Legislation, the Municipalities Act, requires municipalities to act through council decisions. Council decisions are required to be made by resolution or bylaw, and decisions can only be made at council meetings that are open to the public. Individual council members, which includes the mayor, do not have any legislative authority to make unilateral decisions. So what does this mean? It means a couple things. For any type of council meeting that may occur in a garage or through texting and emailing, that's not a meeting, and it should not happen. The public, your voters, have a right to hear council discuss and to debate matters. This also means that if a council member takes an action or tries direct an action without a resolution, so without being authorized by council, that council member can be personally liable for it. So for example, if you feel your resort village needs a new riding lawnmower, let's say you go down to the local dealership, make a deal with the salesperson and purchase one. You bring the receipt back, you give it to the administrator and you ask for payment. Well, first of all, the administrator does not have the authority to reimburse you for that. And if you did not have council approval to go and buy that, and council does not authorize it, you are going to be on the hook for that riding lawnmower. You're going to be the new owner of it, not the municipality. So a really big thing to remember is if there's no resolution or bylaw, there's no authority to act upon council's wishes. You will be required, if you are the successful candidate, to sign an oath or affirmation of office. Before you start any duties as a council member, you have to sign it before the first meeting of council. Your oath of office addresses that as an elected member, you are qualified to hold office. You have not and you will not receive payment or reward for any corrupt practices. You have read and understood the code of ethics, the rules of conduct and procedures applicable, and Marnie touched upon those. Promises to perform the duties of office, and you will disclose any conflict of interest within the context of the Municipalities Act. And also that you will comply with the code of ethics, the rules of conduct, and the procedures as per the Municipalities Act and by the council. Now, if you've already submitted your nomination papers, you would have had to also file a public disclosure statement, and that's going to form part of your nomination papers. So what is a public disclosure statement? They are documents that assure the public they elected someone that will make the best decisions for the municipality. They have a direct impact when dealing with conflict of interest. Anything on your public disclosure statement is a direct conflict of interest, and you are required to declare a conflict of interest with any of those matters, and we'll touch upon that in the next slide. They also help assist with transparency and accountability. So if you are the successful candidate in the election now, you will also have to file one of these public disclosure statements again. And they have to be filed with your administrator within 30 days of being elected. So they're going to be most likely identical forms that you filed with your nomination papers, but you'll have to complete this again. And if you do not complete this again, it is a reason for disqualification. And then every year, by November 30th, you will be required to submit an annual declaration as well. And then if there's any amendments to it, there's an amended form, and your CAO will be able to provide you with all of this and even more information on it. So when we talk about conflict of interest, it is important to understand that it can and is almost likely to exist. And its existence is not evidence of wrongdoing. But what matters is that the process in handling a conflict of interest is followed. With the size of our municipalities, it's going to be almost impossible not to have a conflict of interest in at least one matter that you deal with as in your term of office. So that's okay. Just make sure you follow these steps each and every time the topic comes up. So first of all, you declare that you have a conflict of interest before any consideration on the matter. You can disclose, or you are required to disclose what the conflict is and why and how it might affect your impartiality. So whether it's a family member that it might be talking to or a financial conflict, you give a high-level reason. You abstain from voting on a question, decision, or recommendation or other action that council is considering about the matter. And you actually refrain from participating in any discussion on the matter. And then you leave the room until the discussion and the voting on the matter has concluded. As I said with your public disclosure statement, anything on that is a conflict of interest and you are required to declare. And only you as a council member can declare a conflict of interest. The other council members or the CAO might have a conversation with you, maybe suggesting that this might be a conflict for you, but it's only you yourself who can declare it. And if a contravention occurs, so if you fail to declare a conflict of interest and follow the steps, there's a couple of different possibilities for it to be handled. One option is a code of ethics, which we'll discuss next. And the other reason is, or the other way of handling a conflict of interest is it is a reason for disqualification. So it is a reason to remove you from council. There's only certain reasons to have you disqualified, and not properly handling a conflict of interest is one of those reasons. The Code of Ethics bylaw essentially defines how council members behave with each other, employees, and the public using the model code under the municipality's regulations that address honesty. Council members must be truthful and honest, are truthful and open, objectivity. Decisions must be made carefully, fairly, and impartially. What is in the best interest of the resort village versus a few people? And this goes back to what Marnie was speaking to as well. Coming to the meetings with preconceived decisions, listen to what's being discussed and be impartial. Respect everyone, including other members. You need to treat, everyone needs to be treated with dignity, understanding, transparency, and accountability. Council business should be conducted so that citizens will be able to clearly see how and why a decision was made, what information, advice, and consultation council considered, and which legislative requirements were followed. So this goes back to the example I discussed about having garage meetings or emailing and texting, those conversations between council members. Those should not happen. The public do have a right to hear these discussions. Confidentiality. Confidential information learned while in office must be kept private. As a member of council, you should not benefit from information you learned in fulfilling your role as an elected official. Leadership and public interest and responsibility. Having this bylaw is a requirement. Every municipality must have one. And yeah. So now to tie the last three things that I've talked about, the public disclosure statements, conflict of interest, and code of ethics together. The public disclosure statements are a mechanism for the public to hold their council members accountable, ensuring that council members are making decisions in the best interest of the municipality versus their own interests, or maybe the interests of family members or people closely connected. You will have a conflict of interest with everything on your public disclosure statement. And the Code of Ethics bylaw requires that you declare a conflict of interest. When you decided to run for the municipal office, you accepted the duty to act in the municipality's best interest and without your private or perceived interests affecting your decision making. There will likely be a time sooner than later during your term of office when a matter before the council in which you have a conflict of interest, and that's okay. Just make sure you handle it the proper way. Ombudsman Saskatchewan has a lot of information on conflict of interest and the proper ways to declare it and handle it. We refer a lot of our callers to the Ombudsman or to Ombudsman Saskatchewan website. Now to get into the role of the administrator. Administrators are accountable to council, taxpayers, citizens, legislation, staff, and their own profession. The administrator wears multiple hats, and their role includes providing financial management, advising council on legislative and operational matters, and providing the overall administration of the municipality. Administrators must be qualified under the Urban Municipal Administrators Act. and if not otherwise provided for by council, the administrator is responsible for the hiring, suspension, and dismissal of all municipal employees. Administrators are expected to remain impartial in their role as advisors to ensure that decisions made by their municipal councils are carried out. And in addition to the Municipalities Act, the administrator must be aware of other legislative requirements that apply to their municipality. And there are a significant number of them, such as the Saskatchewan Employment Act, the Public Health Act, and so on. If you remember from earlier on in this presentation, the council is the decision maker, and it's the administrator who is responsible for carrying out the decisions made by council. Lastly, and probably most importantly, the public. When it comes to discussing the roles and responsibilities, we need to discuss the role of the public. The Municipalities Act provides the public its own power to hold their elected officials accountable. They have a right to attend and observe council meetings. And when I say public, it's not just your voters of your municipality. Any person has a right to come and attend those council meetings, to have access to certain documents, such as minutes once they've been approved by your council, and the audited financial statements, bylaws, and contracts. And we speak a lot to this with a lot of our callers on what is accessible to any person. The voters have the ability to petition council to take specific actions under the Municipalities Act, such as petitioning for a public meeting or for a referendum, or even for a financial or management audit. When we speak to the public who are not in favor of the decisions their council are making, we quite often refer to a guide that we have online on saskatchewan.ca, and it's called A Citizen's Guide to Shaping Council Decisions. And it goes into these a lot more detailed than I just did. I think we can kind of go through this section a little bit faster here. Just in the essence of time. Every municipality is required to have a council procedures bylaw. Oops. And the council procedures bylaw is essentially how your council conducts their meetings. It's going to set the parameters of how a person can be added to the agenda to present to council. It's going to set the parameters or the process for motions to be made. Do your motions only require a mover, or is a seconder required? It's also going to define the proper conduct of elected officials and the public at council meetings. So a popular question that we quite often get is, can the meetings be recorded? Can someone come in and actually record the meetings? And we refer them to your council procedures bylaw. What does it say in there? Okay. And it's also most likely going to talk about rules regarding meetings through electronic meetings. So decision making, council exercises its power by passing resolutions or bylaws, and all decisions are to be made by council at an open public meeting. Your decisions will affect people, and you will not always be able to say yes. When you do say no, you will want your ratepayers to feel that they've had their fair shot and they understand the reasoning behind council decisions. They may not agree with the decision, but at least they understand. Okay, and I'm just gonna do that. And again, any decision made by council has to be at an open meeting. Closed session, there's only certain reasons for council to go in camera. And whatever is discussed in camera or in a closed session is confidential. The reasons to go in camera would be for long range or strategic planning, or for reasons that fall under Part 3 of the Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So that would be such things as legal advice, human resource. And not to sound like a broken record, but no decisions can be made in closed sessions. Council can have discussions, but then they would come out of camera to make the decision if there's a decision to be made. We waive caution to go in camera very rarely or just as needed. The more you go in camera, most likely the public is going to start questioning what is so confidential, what is council talking about behind those closed doors. So it's always better to err on the side of openness and transparency. Okay, and I'm just going to wrap up my presentation here. Marnie was saying that there is a lot of information on the Government of Saskatchewan website. Just new is a guide that we put out. It's called Consider Running for Municipal Council. And on the next slide, I actually have a QR code. If you scan it, it will take you right to the page and all those resources. There is a council member's handbook, Municipal Leadership and Development Program. You'll hear that it being referred to as the MLDP. We have 10-minute trainers. There's the Saskatchewan Municipal Peer Network, Ombudsman Saskatchewan, and the Office of the Saskatchewan Information and Privacy Commissioner. Okay, and there's the QR code if any of you are interested in scanning it. And then as you're doing that, all resort villages would have had to do their call for nominations by now. The last possible day for the call for nominations was Friday, June 7th. So if you have not already submitted your nomination papers, the deadline for that is Saturday, June 22nd at 2 p.m. And that's actually legislated that it's 2 p.m. is the cutoff on Saturday, June 22nd. So if you are interested and you haven't submitted, go down and speak to your CAO and ask for copies of the nomination papers and the public disclosure statements and get them submitted. And I just touched on this. And thank you very much.
So there we go. Hello, everyone. So I'll just jump right in, and I was going to mention that some of the matters that Toby was touching on are probably going to be very similar to the issues that I'm going to go through today, probably because there's some common themes that often arise with respect to council operations, council's role in a municipal organization, and how municipalities can navigate that, to ensure a successful municipal organizational structure. But I'll just make my way through. So I had sort of done the greeting this morning, and my first slide here is just talking about a little bit about Brownlee LLP. Just as a quick intro, we are we started as an Alberta law firm. We, on the municipal side of things, we act strictly for municipalities in both Alberta and more recently in Saskatchewan. So we don't do any work for landowners or developers. We are strictly providing our services to municipalities. If we are interacting with your municipality, it's likely through your CAO. So we generally don't deal directly with council on matters unless we've been asked to sit in on a council meeting and provide a presentation. We have quite a few practice areas at Brownlee, so we are a very specialized group of people, whether it's planning, procurement, corporate matters, land matters. Me personally, you'll find me in both the governance area, as well as what I like to call dirt law. So anything to do with dirt, infrastructure, building things, that sort of thing, that's where you'll find me preparing contracts for municipalities. We are proud to be a SUMA central source partner. And so with that, one of the services that we do provide to municipalities in Saskatchewan is what we call our municipal helpline. This is a free service that generally CAOs and staff can call to get 10 to 15 minutes of free legal advice with one of our junior lawyers. And then if a new file needs to be opened, we'll do that. Or if not, we'll just proceed on a no fees basis. So we are happy to be working with SUMA and providing that service, and happy to be here today once again to guide you through some of the candidate school discussions. So the way I've prepared my presentation for everyone today was just sort of a very high level overview of what you should know as a potential counselor. To be clear, we do sometimes offer orientations to new counselors once they've joined a council, and those orientations can run from a half day. Generally, they'll be a full day. So there is a lot of information for you to learn once you're in that council role, and it's a very steep learning curve. But what I've tried to do today is really kind of narrow it down to some of the high level points that I think it's really important to be aware of when you're thinking about whether or not you want to run for council. So the first one, and this is one that Toby did touch on briefly as well, is when you're a counselor, the most important thing you need to understand is your role in the organization. So there's obviously a lot of reasons that someone might run for council. You might want to be making your community a better place. You might want to be shaping where the municipality is going with respect to its policies and its projects and how it's spending its tax dollars. And really, you just want to be able to be in a position of seeing your community be vibrant and sustainable. And those are all very important reasons and great reasons to be running for council. But once you get there, you do need to understand that you have a very specific role in the large corporate organization that is a municipality. So municipalities are corporations at the end of the day. They are provincially created corporations, provincially controlled by the legislation that's in place. And so there are some very specific roles that council has, and you're just going to want to make sure you keep that clear, because once we have a blurring of roles, that's where the issues usually arise. So making sure you have a very clear understanding of the actual role as a council member is going to be really important. So there are lots of things that a counselor will do, both in a council meeting and outside of council meetings, when meeting with the public and campaigning and meeting with your constituents to find out their concerns and their issues that they'd like to raise. But the first place that you're going to want to start is going to be the Municipalities Act, that has some very clear guidelines on what the role of a counselor is. So that's going to be section 92. I would suggest that starting around section 79 of that act, I think that's the right reference, that's probably where you're going to want to start to really sort of dig into some of those counselor roles. But here you can see your role is to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality. You're expected to participate in public meetings. You're expected to vote on bylaws and resolutions that are going to guide your municipality forward and set the policies and strategic plans for your municipality. You are expected to ensure that administrative practices are being implemented as per council decisions. So via your CAO, you're going to want to make sure that your CAO is aware of what the policy decisions are, where council wants to see the municipality going, and then holding your CAO accountable to ensure that actions are being taken place to meet those policy goals. You are very much required to keep confidential information confidential. There are obligations under both the Municipalities Act and the Protection of Private Information legislation that's in place in Saskatchewan that you'll have to be aware of with respect to keeping information confidential. You might also receive information in a closed session portion of a council meeting. And so those are the types of issues that you're going to want to make sure that you have, once you're there, absolute clarity on with respect to your obligations. And then one of the final and biggest pieces of your role is going to make sure that the municipality stays financially healthy. So you're going to want to make sure you're aware of the finances of the municipality, where the money's coming in, where it's going out, and setting priorities with respect to how that money is to be spent. So again, going back to that section 92, the other big piece of advice that we like to give is that you definitely want to know that you're aware of the applicable legislation. And this is something that you're going to want to start to look at even before you decide whether or not you want to run and start your campaign, because there is a lot to be aware of. There's a lot of restrictions. Municipalities are what we would call a creature of the province. So the province sets what a municipality can do, what it cannot do, what it must do, what it must not do. So there are some very clear obligations in there that you're going to want to be aware of. And the two most important acts that we suggest you look at are, again, going to be the Municipalities Act. That's going to be the bulk of the information on how your municipality operates, what the expectations are, and your role on council, as well as your CAO's role. And then the other one is going to be the Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Again, that is going to be where you're going to find a lot of information with respect to your obligation to keep information confidential, both when in camera and with respect to your municipality's general obligations to keep personal information private. So just touching on the financial aspect again, a very large role of a counselor in the municipal organization is going to be to have a good understanding of the municipal or the finances of your municipality. Almost everything a municipality do has cost implications. There needs to be revenue for what the municipality is doing. And so council is going to be the one that's going to be called upon to make decisions on how the resources are going to be managed and how we're going to bring in revenue in order to pay for the things that residents want. And so it can be a very detail-oriented matter. You will have professionals to help you out. You will have your CAO to guide you. You will have financial advice provided to you so you can make an informed decision. But you just need to be aware that looking at finances and considering budgets is a very large part of your role on municipal council, and to make sure you're fully understanding the status of the finances of your municipality before making a decision are really important. It's not required of you to make perfect decisions. You're required to make reasonable, good faith decisions, rely on the resources that you have and the advice that you're given, and really take the time to understand what's before you. So again, just on the piece of roles and responsibilities, I would say that if you take anything away from this session, one of the top things to take away is the importance of role clarity within a municipality. Right now, we are having a large number of issues on councils because of a lack of role clarity, because of that sort of blurred lines that I was talking about previously. What happens is sometimes a councillor will lose focus of the fact that they are not the one that is to be directing staff or giving staff instructions. At the end of the day, the CAO or the administrator is the only employee of council, and they are the one that council should be communicating with, should be receiving updates from, and should be directing to then go forward and operate the day-to-day operations of the municipality. So there has to be some very clear, distinct lines there. Sometimes councils will need to be reminded of that line. A good CAO will constantly and respectfully remind you of that line, just to make sure that you are staying in your policy side of things, and your CAO is the one that is going to be dealing with the day-to-day operations. And if your CAO is not doing things in line with the policies you've set and the strategies, the strategic plans you've put forward, then that is a discussion between council and the CAO. So there just needs to be a very clear understanding of that. And we find that local governments are going to work best when there is a defined separation between council that governs and those that manage the municipality's operations. So just going back to the roles and responsibilities and the jobs of both council and CAO, the other thing that is very important is for there to be a very high level of trust between council and their CAO. Again, if you think about a municipality like a corporation, a CAO or administrator is essentially the CEO. So they are the ones operating, managing the operations. So they are the ones that, council is to get all their information from. There has to be a good understanding and a good level of trust there. The council has to believe that the CAO is providing them with good advice, with sound advice, that is reaching out to professionals, finance professionals, planning professionals, and lawyers as well when needed, if there are questions that need to be answered, and then bringing that information back to council. So again, role clarity and the importance of maintaining a good relationship between council and CAO is going to be extremely important to ensuring successful operations during your term. So under the Municipalities Act, there are some very clear requirements and processes with respect to addressing conflicts of interest. So the main expectation is that councillors are expected to uphold the public interest ahead of their own private interests. So anytime there's a situation where a matter might be before council that might have an impact on you as, in your personal situation, whether it might impact your business, whether it might impact your employment, whether or not it might impact a family member, Those are the types of situations where you are likely going to be required to flag the fact that you believe you have a conflict and you're going to have to step away from the issue. The other one that's generally quite obvious is going to be something that will have an impact on you financially. So perhaps it's a zoning question that deals with lands you might own in the municipality, and that zoning is going to directly impact how you might be able to develop those lands. Those are the types of things where you'll have to think, am I going to be able to approach this issue in an objective and reasonable manner? Or is my own desires and my own goals for my own business going to be what drives my decision making? And if you're in that situation, your best approach is to declare a conflict of interest, to remove yourself from the meeting. You're no longer able to participate in discussions about that matter. You can't vote on that matter. You're just completely removed from it. And that just allows you to participate in council while also being a member of your community, potentially a business owner in your community. Just allows you to balance those two roles in a reasonable manner. So again, going back to some of those, how do we work within the municipality? And these are, important pieces of advice in any organizational structure. But again, something we find ourselves reminding counselors and CAOs of when issues do arise, is that teamwork and respect are ultimately should be at the forefront of how you're addressing issues within the municipality. It's always best that you work as a team, that once a decision is made, that you act as one. You're not openly criticizing each other after a matter has been voted on and the voting has closed. You are expected to attend meetings with an open mind. So of course you're going to come to council with your own opinions, your own agendas, the things that you may have campaigned on because you heard from residents that it was an issue they cared about. But you still have to come to a meeting being able to hear other people's perspectives and have sort of respectful and good faith debates on those issues. So you should be respecting the opinions of others. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them. That doesn't mean you have to accept them, but it does mean that you have to be open to hearing what they have to say. And obviously, counselors are passionate individuals. Again, you come to this role because you have likely a very strong interest in seeing your community be viable and sustainable for the future. And so disagreements are going to happen. If anything, I think, some governance people will say that there should be disagreements. Disagreements are healthy. They allow people to talk through issues, to see different points of view, and to come to ultimately what is a good decision. If everybody has sort of the same ideas and the same approach, you might never have that diversity of thought that can be really beneficial to the innovation of a municipality and pushing your municipality forward. So just having an understanding that debates are a healthy part of being on council, and that they need to be managed in a very respectful way. So just a quote I actually saw on Instagram a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was a good one to include in a discussion like this. This was from Adam Grant, who is an organizational psychologist. Anybody who listens to podcasts regularly or is interested in that area of work is likely heard of Adam Grant. And so he just had posted a quote that I thought was a good one to keep in mind in the back of your mind if and when you are sitting on a council matter. So a good debate isn't about one person declaring victory. It's about both people making a discovery. Good faith debate is not an attack. It's an opportunity to sharpen your ideas. So I think, again, if you can keep that approach in your mind, that'll be really important for you to hold on to as you move towards council if you're successfully elected. So the other thing that's going to be very important for you to understand, and this would be something that I would suggest that you start looking at now, sort of preemptively before the election period starts, is to understand the processes and procedures of the particular municipality that you are thinking of running for. All municipalities are required to have what's called a procedure bylaw. That's generally what it's called. This is going to be where the requirements regarding meetings, the definition or the procedures that are in place with respect to council meetings, how and when they're scheduled, if they can happen virtually or not, your expected level of participation, etc. That's going to be the places where you're going to find the meats and bones of processes with respect to council meetings and procedures. The other important policy document that you're going to want to look at for your municipality is a code of ethics or a code of conduct. It might have one of those names. All municipalities are required to have a code of ethics in order to define the standards and the values that council expects every member of council to adhere to when addressing each other in council meetings, when working with the public, and when working with staff. So those are going to be, that's going to be the sort of the benchmark of the expectations of your behavior. And if a breach of a code of conduct does occur, there's going to be a process in there about how that a breach might be investigated, might be addressed. There's also processes in there about how complaints can be made and how to work through that process. What we don't want to see is codes of conduct turned into, you know, weapons. We want to see them as ways of setting the standard of how council is expected to act. And if there are issues, you know, the first way to deal with that is not necessarily a complaint. It's perhaps a roundtable discussion on an issue that has come up and working through it as a council. But if things escalate, if a particular council member is not following their roles and responsibilities, they're getting involved in the operations side, or perhaps they're being disrespectful during council meetings, that's where your code of conduct is going to come in to sort of guide the process on how to formally address that issue. And then finally, you know, it likely goes without saying, but we always encourage people to be open to learning, both before you get on council and then once you get on council for the entire 4 years. The entire time is an area of learning, a time for learning. When you're first elected, your first 30 days, there's going to be a ton of information thrown at you. Again, bylaws, policies, procedures, legislation, finances. It's going to be a lot, and you're not going to be expected to know it all within the first 30 days. So make sure you're always, you know, open to attending training, refreshing your information, seeking further information where needed. If something isn't clear to you, it's very likely it's not clear to the new counselor, the other new counselor who might be sitting next to you. So being, you know, open to asking questions, even if you think they might be silly or an obvious answer, it's better to ask the question than to make a decision based on information that isn't entirely clear to you. There are plenty of resources online. Both SUMA and the province of Saskatchewan have many resources that are a good starting point for educating yourself on what it means to be in council, how municipalities operate, and the expectations. And so I suggest that you review those resources as much as you can to get a really fulsome understanding of what it means to be a councillor. And then again, last but not least, when in doubt, ask questions. If your CAO doesn't know the answer, then they can go to those professionals, legal, financial professionals, to find that answer for you. So again, you're in a position to make an informed decision. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I know we're probably going to have a question period at the end, so I'm happy to leave that question period for that time. Just let me know, Stephanie, what would be best.
Yeah, we'll keep moving on with the presentations for now, but if you have any questions for Marnie, please enter them into the Q&A so that you don't forget them, or feel free to write them down and save them until we get to that question period. I'd now like to invite Linda, as our representative from the Provincial Association of Resort Communities, to give us some background on what it's like being on municipal council in a resort community.
Again, my name is Linda Anwaller, and I'm from the resort village of Melville Beach on the beautiful Crooked Lake. The Provincial Association of Community Resorts of Saskatchewan, we began working on this in 1986, and we've been here ever since. We're representing over 100, I think it's probably 126 resort and communities across Saskatchewan. Last year, we had our first face-to-face conference in Saskatoon in October, and it was attended by about 66 members. And we're looking forward to this year again to having a conference. It's running October 18th and 19th, and it will be at the Dakota Dunes. Last year, we touched on things about the one that we started with RMs and the OH, and we talked with Andrea Ehrlich. She was a speaker, and it talked about the new regulations that will govern the RMs and OH that's going to be required for them working together. We also, from the resort villages, we talked about the 5 major issues that can lead to dissolution of a resort village, along with examples of possible problems in areas. And on behalf of every community college that wants to keep their lakes, lake waters free from the zebra mussels and other infestations that are coming within our province. And we had Gary Geiger by Zoom on there. Dr. Peter Levitt, also from the university, talked about he was talking about the responsibility we have in terms of the keeping our lakes clean and water quality in Saskatchewan, which was very informative because a lot of people weren't aware of what was happening. Also, we then touched on the Duck to Shaw from Ducks Unlimited, and Orly McPherson chaired a forum on they offered insights into what is needed to maintain healthy recreational lakes, including the cleansing roles played by the wetlands and sloughs and creeks. So this is one thing that we've also been involved in, is the wetlands and the erosion of our wetlands within Saskatchewan. So this is some of the things that we have been touching on. We look forward to anyone and everyone from the resort villages and the RMs to attend our convention. And it will be again at the Dakota Dunes on October 18th and 19th this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Linda. And thank you to Toby, Marnie, and Linda. That was all very great information. So we're now going to move on from our presentations into the Resort Village Hall portion of this session. I invite any members of the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I will let you know when it's your turn to speak. I'm going to start right now with a couple of questions that we received earlier, but prior to the session, and then we do have one in the Q&A box so far. So the first question that I have here is, who retains possession of a ballot box for advanced polls, and who is responsible for counting the votes from each box? And is there anyone that's able to answer that one?
I can jump in here.
Thank
So the Local Government Election Act, and that's the legislation that governs municipal elections. It's a very prescriptive legislation, and you are to follow it. So to answer Stephanie's question, it's the Deputy Returning Officer who is responsible for the ballot box after advanced polls. And they are the ones who are responsible for counting the ballots after the election itself.
Hey, thank you very much. The next question that I have here is, do administrators have conflict of interest as returning officers?
You want me to jump in? It may be perceived that they do, and they have to be very careful. The thing is again, the Local Government Election Act stipulates that it's the administrator who is the returning officer, unless council provides otherwise. And if council is going to appoint someone other than the administrator, it needs to be done, I believe, within 90 days prior to the election. The returning officer themselves have very little to do with the actual election. They're responsible for setting up and making sure everything is ready for the election. But when it comes down to the advance poll and election day and even counting the ballots, it's the Deputy Returning Officer that holds the bulk of that responsibility. And then it's the Deputy Returning Officer that files the forms to the Returning Officer, who then posts. So yes, they may have, it's going to be almost impossible not to have some conflicts or perceived conflicts, but there are ways to navigate around those.
Okay, thank you. I think this next one will probably be for you as well, Toby. I have this came in through the chat during the session, and it's CAO, are they the only employee, and can council pay themselves for work in the community, or is it outside of council's responsibilities?
To go to what Marnie had spoke to earlier, the council's role is to appoint, to make sure there is an administrator. So if you're going through the Municipalities Act, then yes, that is the one employee under council, but there can be multiple employees. So it really depends on your organizational chart, how it is established, and who is responsible for reporting who or to who on that. Council members have the ability to collect remuneration for the services that they have provided. The remuneration has to be set by council at the beginning of the year. It is done by resolution, what those rates are, and it may include mileage as well and per diems for food if they were, say, going to a SIMA convention, and hotel and everything like that. As for the extra duties or the volunteering duties that council may be doing, if it's not authorized by council to be taking those actions, you would need council then to approve the payment for those to be done. The Municipalities Act does say that council members cannot be employees of the municipality that they serve. So you need to be very cautious that you are not taking the role of an employee. So when we do speak to council and we speak to governance training, it's essentially stay in your lane. Your lane as a council member is to make council meeting, and you make those decisions by resolutions or by bylaws. It's up to the employees to carry out your decisions.
So then related to that, I have a question that's come in that says, can mayor or council be reimbursed for doing maintenance in a village if no maintenance person is available?
Essentially, that's the role of an employee. And like I just said, council members are not permitted to be employees of the municipality. I guess if your council at the end of the day passes a resolution authorizing payment for it, that's a council decision. But again, you run the risk of, are you council member or are you employee? And as part of being a municipality, you have to make sure that you have the proper staff, everything like that in place to handle those, the maintenance of roads, everything like that.
Okay, thank you. So the next question that I have here is it mandatory to order and purchase ballots from SUMA? And I can answer that no, they can be purchased from any supplier, although SUMA does have those available for those who wish to order them from us. I don't know if there's anyone else that would like to add to that at all, or if you'd like me to carry on to the next question. Good to go. Okay. What I have here is, can a council member, I would say this one goes along with what you've already answered regarding council members getting involved with day-to-day operations of the municipality and how that crosses the line with employment. The next question that we have is, does every decision need to go to a council meeting? And can decisions be made over emails and texts?
No.
I can jump in on that one. So every decision that is made by council has to firstly be done by resolution or by bylaw. And all of that needs to be done in the open portion of a council meeting. So all of that, not only the discussion, but also the ultimate voting on either the resolution that's been put forward or the bylaw that's been put forward, has to be done in an open session. So by email or in an offline meeting, that sort of thing. Again, those types of discussions and debates should not be happening unless you're in the public forum of a council meeting.
Okay, thank you. So another question that's come in through the Q&A here is, Toby mentioned that mayor or councillor can be removed. My question is, what entity has the power to remove and what is the process?
I could jump in there. So section 147 of the Municipalities Act, it speaks to reasons for disqualification. And what it says is, if you as a council member have any of these, so no longer eligible to be on council, or fail to declare a conflict of interest, it says that you must resign immediately. However, if you fail to resign, Section 148 talks about the enforcement of disqualification, and there's a few different options there. Council can apply to the courts to have a judge make a decision on the disqualification of a member or members. Or the voters of the municipality also have that ability to apply to the courts to have a judge make a decision whether a council member should be disqualified pursuant to the Municipalities Act. Council members also have the ability now to declare a seat vacant for reasons of disqualification. And then that person or those council or council members who have their seat has been declared vacant have 10 business days to appeal to the courts to have a judge make a decision. So if they do not appeal to the courts and 10 days has passed, they've missed their right to appeal on that. So that would be the enforcement of it.
And I've had a question come in that's related to that. From the other side, what can be done to remove an administrator? The hiring, firing, and you know what? You go, Marnie. I don't want to.
No, I'm sure we have the same answer. So an administrator, again, when I go back to who, specifically with respect to resort villages, with respect to who council has the authority to hire and to terminate if necessary, that decision lies with council. So with respect to that process, there is likely a portion of discussing that matter that can happen in camera. Obviously, that is a private matter. That is a matter of staffing and personal information, depending on the reason that you may be wanting to let your administrator go. You may also want to get external advice with respect to employment, the contract that you have, the severance that you might be obligated to pay. Those are all sorts of things that council can do and seek that advice. And then ultimately, it'll be the council that'll vote, just like it would any other decision with respect to whether or not they want to hold on to the administrator or not. So that decision lies with council.
Thank you. So the next one that I have here is, how should confidential documents be handled? Can they be emailed to each member, or are copies to be kept by each council member, and do they need to be returned to the office?
Arlene, do you want me to take this one? It's really going to be dependent on each municipality themselves on how they handle this. Every municipality is going to have their own practice. Confidential information, we do raise flags if they're being emailed. We highly recommend that it's not emailed to a council member's private email account, that they have a municipal email account, so then at least only that one council member has access to it, maybe, and not the whole family. If it's an Outlook or a Gmail account, something like that. I know some municipalities, when they discuss confidential information, it's always in camera, and that's the risk of emailing it, is not in camera. So I would advise not to email confidential information. It should be discussed in camera. And I know some administrators provide copies to all council members and then ask for those copies back, and then they destroy them to ensure that they are kept confidential. But again, that's just going to depend on each municipality type. The emailing, how do you ensure the confidentiality of that? So it's not something I would suggest or recommend.
Okay, thank you, Toby. And Marnie, did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I agree with that. That's you have to be aware of your obligations. And so, there may be situations when an email is necessary, perhaps, but then there should also be, processes in place with respect to securing your systems, etc. But I do think that with very sensitive information, a hard copy is likely your safest approach to prevent it from being, inadvertently released.
Thank you. So another question that I've had come in through the chat here is, what risks should potential individual counselors be aware of? Further and collectively, are councils well advised to develop an annual risk review develop and annually review a risk register.
I think just on this, I don't know, the question of risk can pertain to quite a few things. I don't know if the question relates to the counselor's own sort of liability exposure that may happen, or the pitfalls that they may fall into. What I would suggest on that, if that is the question, is just the expectation is that you're always acting in good faith and in the best interest of your municipality, that you're aware of your authority under the Municipalities Act. There's going to be very distinct situations where a council is not authorized to do something, and if you do act without proper authorization or without the proper authority, there can be some consequences for that. So it's to be aware of exactly the decisions that you're allowed to make, and to also be making those decisions in good faith. As far as risks go, you know, from a perspective of the risk the municipality might be facing, that's going to be details that your CAO is going to bring to the forefront. That's their job, to be aware of, you know, liability risks that might be a concern, you know, infrastructure issues that might be a concern. If you hear about something that you think is a risk or is a potential risk to the municipality, that is something you can bring back to your CAO for further information. But I'm just not quite sure what type of risk we might be referring to. I don't know if Toby has anything to add.
I think you summed it up perfectly. Just remember, all decisions are made at an open meeting and by council by resolution or bylaw, and no independent or individual council member has the authority to make decisions on their own, unilateral decisions.
The next question that I have come in here is, are agendas typically provided in advance of meetings? I'm not sure who would like to take that one. I see Linda nodding her head yes there.
Where I'm going to refer you to is your council procedures bylaw. Sorry, Linda, I'm going to jump in and then let you take over. But your council procedures bylaw should specify when the agendas are going to be available, if they're presented or available ahead of time or at the council meeting themselves. And it will also specify, or should specify, when is the last date or time that something can be added to the agenda without council approval.
Yes, I agree with that. But I guess we missed that last part about having notification how soon or how late we were able to get information in. We kind of missed that, I guess, in our council meetings. But anyway, yes, everything has to be approved ahead of time. And if not, I mean, there can be emergency times where something has to be submitted. Some emergencies come up that couldn't be maybe included, but no, the majority is that it has to be submitted definitely ahead of time.
Hey, thank you very much. Another one that I have here is there an obligation for resort villages to provide advanced polls? Oftentimes seasonal residents do not go to their resort every weekend.
Yes.
So I'm hearing from Toby or from Linda, sorry, that yes, they are. And Toby, you have something to add?
Yeah, up until this year, if resort villages had mail-in ballots, they were not required to have advanced polls. But that has changed for this year. There were a lot of amendments that went through the Local Government Election Act, and now all municipality types are required to have advanced polls.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another one here regarding nomination papers is there an obligation to provide a local drop-off for nomination papers? And then they've stated that their administrator lives an hour from the resort village.
It looks like in ours that we just got the notification of, intent for people to apply for council, and also you could email it in. So, because there's so many people that are not living there, or would have time, I guess, because we just recently got it to get in by the 22nd. So, Ours, they have an email to contact them with.
Yep, that is an option. And on the notice of call for nomination, that would have had to been out by last Friday. It would specify where the location is to drop off those papers. So look at the call for nominations to see those locations.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. So what the next question that I have here is, what financial information is the right of the voters? And I'm not sure, Toby or Marnie, if you have anything you'd like to weigh in on there. Linda?
I could jump in, and then if someone else wants to take over, that's fine as well. So under section 117 of the Municipalities Act, it talks about municipal information that any person can obtain during regular business hours. And it speaks to the audited financial statements being accessible to any person. Depending on how your council, or if your council does monthly financial statements, if those financial statements are attached to and form part of your minutes, those are accessible as well, because minutes are accessible to the public once they've been approved by council. And the budget is required to be approved by council. So that's going to form the minutes as well. So you always have a right, once the minutes have been approved, to have a look at the budget. And then anything that doesn't fall under those, any person can do a Freedom of Information and request under LaFoy to try to get access to those other documents.
Related to that as well, we do have a question asking, do meeting minutes have to be posted? If there's anyone that'd like to respond to that.
Wow. Meeting minutes are not required to be posted online. That's a decision. There are more and more municipalities that are posting their minutes, which is great for transparency, and so that the ratepayers and public don't have to come to the office. But no, there's no requirement for them to be posted. Sorry, Linda, I'm jumping in. I'll let you go.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Linda?
No, I agree with her. So
No, all good. Just wanted to double check before I moved on. I did have another question regarding the nominations papers. They were just asking if you could confirm that they can be emailed. They just wanted to clarify that that was the response.
it was an intent of anyone that had an intent to apply to run for councillors or mayor, that they could submit submit. It was it was an email that was sent out, and there was a link to complete.
So then the next question that I have come in here, we've got time for one final one. When council allows developments which directly harm the lake, which could mean our property values decrease, can the council be held responsible for this?
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't quite get the question there. Sorry.
Oh, they were asking if when council allows developments which may directly harm the lake and decrease property values, can they be held responsible?
So I'm going to give a standard lawyer question, which is it depends. So that's not to say no, but the things to keep in mind is that outside of specific environmental legislation, which may or may not apply, with respect to council decisions, it's generally going to be a decision that is completely unreasonable, that is a negligence, bad faith decision, is generally the level of decision that we're talking about, where a council might be liable for any number of matters. With respect to this particular matter, it's going to depend on the facts, the information that council had in front of it. Again, I think I mentioned in my presentation, councils aren't expected to be perfect. They're expected to make the best decision that they can based on the information that's in front of them. But with respect to some of the particular details of this question, there may be specific legislation that could apply to sort of say that, you know, it doesn't require a level of negligence. So it's possible, it may be possible. I would say it's probably a high bar to meet and very fact specific.
My response to that would be, in anything particular I've had, that it would be the watershed authority that would be involved in causing the person to have incur expenses from it or be fined for anything that it has happened to destroy the habitat of the lake or the frontage of the lake. So the watershed is very very diligent in a lot of things on there, but I have known where it personally at Round Lake that there was a big fine put on one developer, you know, for destroying habitat on lakefront. So it has been done, and so you know, I can't say anything too much about Crooked Lake to this point, but yes, I do know other where they have occurred fines for this. But in terms of a person personally be reimbursed, I'm not sure. Because I think it would have to go probably through the watershed authority.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for those answers. We have hit just after 1 o'clock. We do have 2 additional questions left, but I am going to share them with our presenters, and we can contact you afterwards to provide their responses to you. I want to just say another big thank you to everyone for taking the time to be here today. So thank you to our audience for attending, and thank you to our presenters, Toby, Marnie, and Linda, for taking the time to be here to present and to answer those questions.